So it seems that the discussion for today will be split in two because my connection dropped on me, though I have Spectrum. But for the people who are not watching this in direct, I moved closer to the source of the internet. So I hope this will not drop. I see that it's a full, transmission. So if you could recapitulate in 2 minutes, just in 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I was. I mean, when we compare the U.S. with China, we can argue that the differences come mainly because of the political regime, because of the existence of the one chi culture in China, that is a patronage relationship culture where societies where the social capital is, there is a lack of social capital. You need to circumvent somewhat the system, and what you do is to, in the case of China, there is this exchange of gifts, favors, appreciation between the organizations, between the individuals, and between the stakeholders. So in order to get a license to operate, in order to be treated more generously by the media, it's important to cultivate relationships. And these relationships is not something that you just cultivate organizing one dinner event or having a cup of coffee. It's something that is ongoing. It's not something that is ended just with one action. Like in the US, we know how to do it too. I mean, it's like sometimes you have a problem with somebody or you want to have a stronger relationship, and you get together with that group or with that person, But in China, it's a much more on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what they call one chi, and it involves a number of assumptions about how relationships are built, And it's a much longer term approach than we have in the US. It's many management from U.S. corporations, they complain about how long it takes to build this one chi, And there are consulting companies that help you to develop one chi in China. I mean, and that is a factor that, from an American perspective, it distorts a little bit what we understand as relationship building processes. And that's, I would say that's a very important characteristic. And also in China, I mean, you have the rich China that is in the coast, like Beijing, Shanghai, etc. But you have another 75% of the country with very low productivity, and they are in, it's mostly rural country. And that's something that, so you have in one country, you have three countries. You have the coast, you have the rural China, that the gap is much larger than between urban America and rural America, being large in America, as it's getting larger and larger, And you have Hong Kong, So, I mean, you have like three scenarios in the same country. So it's, and also, and you have the problem of the self-control in terms of freedom of expression. I mean, I think we are all aware of that, and I think some American companies decided to participate despite the restrictions of freedom of expression, but they self-censor. Other companies, they just don't operate, because how can Google operate in a market like China? How can Facebook operate in a market like China? So, and then in China, you have these other surrogates, like national surrogates, that are like companies like Facebook, companies like Google, companies like Twitter, that they don't have the name, they have different ownership, they operate mostly in China, but we need to know it. I mean, if we are concerned about the Chinese market, we need to know who are these Chinese companies, that are playing the same role than the large companies like Twitter, Instagram, etc. So it's that's the reality.
Just today, I saw an article saying that in China, the government is trying to negotiate with Zoom to not
Mm-hmm.
allow access to Zoom to activists.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, yeah. Well, even Taiwan had. I mean, look, Taiwan, because Taiwan is so part of the Chinese culture in a way, and it's close to China. You know, they decided not using Zoom in education. So in the educational system, they don't use Zoom because they consider that it's intrusive, that is kind of a monitoring system. You know, so, and that high sensibility can only happen in a place that has so also strong ties with China, you know, like Taiwan.
Right, right. Okay, moving on, I think the next on the list was Brooke. Brooke, do you want to ask your own question, or if not, if you don't have them, I have them printed here.
Yeah, I can. Give me just a minute. It's on my other, I have several tabs open where I was taking notes.
Okay.
Okay, so on the CWU website, you'd stated that the current generation is perhaps the most individualistic and overprotected in the history, and the one that has spent the least amount of time maintaining face-to-face contact with others. And then you go on to say they value safety, and they find it in solitude of their rooms, protected by a screen that is also their way of contact with the outside. And then my question based on that is, do you believe the PR field will have to adapt to the current generation as they get older and enter the workforce? And if so, how do you expect the PR field to change in, say, the next 10 to 15 years to adapt to this upcoming generation that kind of just wants to be alone in their room?
Are you talking about this generation this generation that want to work in the PR field, or this generation as consumers or as stakeholders?
Ones that want to work in the PR field. And I guess really both, because both would be kind of interesting to see how the PR field adapts to consumers that want to be inside and don't really value the face-to-face interaction anymore.
Well, those who want to work in the PR world, I think we are trying to adapt already. I think there has been a big migration to group assignments. You know, I don't know if you have to deal with it, but we have a bunch of group assignments in every course. You know, so try to make them to learn how to work with others. But I still think there's a long there's a lot to do. I mean, I find that, and I don't know if it has to do the larger problems. I don't know if the larger problems have to do with being in the room in this safe zone, as with more type of cultivated, curious people that are able to live their comfort entertainment zone, you know. To be honest, it's not easy to answer the question you have, you know. I'm not noticing, I have to say, I coordinate the internship program, and I'm not noticing that the companies complain to me about the level of introversion of the students.
Oh.
The students are not introverts when they are in the workplace, apparently, you know.
Yeah.
I think they complain, when they complain the most is about sometimes lack of initiative, lack of quality, maybe sometimes to process information, you know.
Yeah.
That's their main complaint, but it's not that in the PR field they are saying, oh wow, this generation is. They may complain about, you know, you probably heard about it many times, about being entitled, work ethic, that kind of thing, you know. They tend to think of them as very nice people. I have to say, you know, very nice people, very friendly to deal with. You know, it's just that sometimes they complain about the quality of their work, especially the writing. So for me, what they need the most sometimes is to have more information stored in their hard disk. I think that's something that the educational system has been telling us for decades, that learning by heart is not important, that we can find everything in Google, that the information is there, you know, why. But the truth is that when you ask students sometimes to write a paper about something and they go to Google, and they really, it's a problem for many of them to discern what is relevant, what is not relevant. And especially, I ask my students, for example, to write country profiles, and they go and they go to the net sphere and they look for information, and they come with information sometimes that really doesn't make much sense, you know. I mean, and I think in part it's because they do not have, they don't have much store about the world in general, you know. So when they access to new information, they really, it's difficult for them to know what's important or what is not important, you know. So I tend to tell my students that they have to be curious, they have to get out and try new things, go to events. I mean, the students like events, they like organizing events, you know, so go to events. And have your own agenda. This is something I insist a lot. Have an agenda of things to do that is not a reactive agenda, just being in your room with your Netflix and with your Prime, you know. So I think you can learn watching fiction. I'm not saying, I mean, everybody watches fiction, but I think they have to create content. I think they have to get accustomed to content creation, you know. And that means if they don't like blogging, be more active in their Twitter accounts, in their LinkedIn accounts, sharing quality content, making interpretations about things that are happening. I think they have to do that on a regular basis, not only when I ask them to write an assignment, but it should be part of their daily menu, you know, of things to do. And that's, I think, what I'm missing the most, you know. In theory, yes, they are, I mean, I have kids, teenagers, you know, and they spend time in their room and I complain, you know.
Yeah.
But they are not necessarily introverts or people that are difficult to work with, you know. It's just that I find that they do need to, they need to try to be more, to do more, you know. And I think that's, and there are some students who do it. I mean, and there are a number of students who do it and they're very good. But I think that's the main issue for me. You know?
Yeah. One thing that I found at the college I work for is students, when they have papers or anything like that, one of the reasons why they've lack quality in the papers they're writing, any of the work they turn in, is because as soon as it gets difficult, they stop working on it and then they get on social media or different stuff like that because they don't want to actually think through it. And so it's interesting to see, like, when I was in school, and part of it we feel is the No Child Left Behind. That was a big thing. And now all those students that have gone through the No Child Left Behind in the school system, public school system, they're all coming to college now. And so now we're having to deal with the students that, even if they didn't do well, they're pushed on to the next grade. And so they weren't really required to, I mean, they had to work, but should they have gotten as far as they did, or should they have worked harder, maybe been held behind? And so we have, even in the college I work for, we've definitely noticed their ability to critically think about things is not always there. So we have to push them and find creative ways to engage them and make them think. So that is definitely something that this generation and like the kids younger than me struggle with. So.
In what university do you teach?
I work for a small Christian college. It's called Urchin College, and then we have a graduate school attached to it. So it's a really small Christian college. We used to be located in Florissant, Missouri, and then we just relocated this past school year to Wentzville, Missouri. So you probably have never heard of it, but but it's a really great college.
I know. Okay. Yeah, I know. I cannot concur more with you. I mean, I think it's a very deep problem. I mean, and it's and I don't know. It's sometimes I'm a little. I mean, I have a number of students who they just want to do event planning, and I tell them it's just, you know what, that's a technical it's a technical expertise, event planning, you know. You can learn to do event planning in a quarter. You don't need to study a degree to do event planning.
Yeah.
And you're gonna reach your peak very soon, you know. I mean, there's really not much opportunity to grow in event planning unless you start your own business of event planning, you know, which is fine, you know, you can do that. But to be honest, I think what is interesting about strategic communication or public relations is that you need to learn about a number of things that are not only communication. So this is something that I always like to bring in my classes, knowledge that is not only communication knowledge. I talk to them about the transparency index. I always play them, okay, the transparency index measures the level of corruption in the public sector in different countries of the world, you know. Well, apparently that sounds more like a political science thing, you know, but the truth is that for us, that's relevant, you know. The index of economic freedom, you know, well, you know what position this country occupies in the index of economic freedom, that can explain a lot of things about how corporations relate to their stakeholders. And I think there's so much stuff that we can learn that is going to help us to improve the relationship between the organizations and the people, you know. And that's the great thing about it. Yeah? And one problem I see with this generation is that they really, only a few of them are committed readers, you know, and they feel motivated to read a 20-page 20 chapter, you know, they much reading. And for me that's a problem. For me that's a challenge. So when there are students that are master students, there's a big difference. But in the undergraduate, yes, that's a problem, you know, because.
Well, I'll let someone else ask a question. It's already 1:52. If John or Ashley want to go ahead and ask one of their questions.
Right, Ashley, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
Sorry, I had my video muted. I had unstable connection for a while, so I thought it would be better than freezing.
You were actually next on the list, so if you can ask your questions.
Sure. I think I will go ahead and skip to my second question. My first one related a lot to Gen Z, and we just had a fruitful discussion about that.
I'm sorry, I'm running out of battery. I'm running out of battery.
Yeah, the battery life, but also the internet connection a little bit.
Well, it's just that I was in my bedroom, you know.
Right, farther from the source, like me.
Let's see. So,
all right, so we're going to go now?
Yeah, you can go now. Sorry.
Okay, so my second question here was, what are the most important components of strategic communication when it comes to national branding?
I don't know if you have heard of Simon Anholt. He has a number of books. He created a concept of country branding or national branding. It's a very new field. It's about 15 years. It has 15 years old, and he developed what he calls the hexagon of national branding. And he says, okay, national branding is about communication, but you cannot have a strong national brand without good performance. So basically, he's saying national branding doesn't exist, but he writes about national branding, you know, and he publishes books. What are the main factors? And I don't disagree with him. Is to be good. I mean, it's really that there is a reality that supports your claims about how the national brand is. Yeah? So, and what he talks mainly are these 6 factors, and I'm talking about them by heart, are the quality of your products. So when people go to the supermarket, what kind of products they find that reinforce the image of that country? Why do we see often the German flag when we buy like a kitchen utensil? Yeah? What is that German flag telling us about the ultra cooker? You know, I just bought one and it has the German flag. You know, it's like, what is that telling me about it? There is a sense of excellence about it. Yeah? If I see something that has the German flag, Probably, there is that. They're talking about the cultural heritage, how you convey the cultural heritage, your literature, your painters, your monuments. That's another factor. Good governance. How is the government of your country? That, for example, a lot of countries have used the COVID crisis to promote themselves because of the good governance. There has been like a competition of countries saying, "Oh no, we did the lockdown really early. We have no victims." We had examples of, I don't know. We had examples of China. You have examples of Sweden at the beginning when they were saying, "Oh no, we are not doing a lockdown. We are just trusting people." We have example of in Southern Europe, Portugal and Greece, modest countries, but they did the lockdown really early and they did much better than most of the European countries. You have the example of South Korea. South Korea has been like the model. So all these good governance, you have example of the Scandinavian countries when we talk about good governance in terms of, okay, how is the education in Finland? How are the rights of the woman in Sweden? I mean, so I already told you 3 factors. 4th factor is the people, how the people are in the country, well-educated people. There are people that they accept plurality and they accept diversity. How are they? Are they tolerant? So we're talking about things that are real. That's what, and sports, for example, sports is very important. In theory, sports is just a game, not very meaningful. During this COVID crisis, we can live without sports. We have seen that there's not the sports, and life goes on, But when you see a team that wins the World Cup, that team is conveying in a way the values of a certain culture, of a certain society. It's the game of this. It's a creative game. It's a game that is very defensive. It's very mechanical. It's a team of people who are multiracial or they're all white. And so sports are becoming a really important factor. So these are already 4 or 5 factors of the 6. I don't remember the other one right now.
Yeah,
that tell me that we need that there is a. If you want to have a strong brand, you need to have good things that are true. I mean, if everything is small, there's nothing tangible. It's really that you can have a strong brand. Saying this, there are countries that could have a better brand with what they have. I mean, I think Germany has a good brand, but the brand they have is a brand like a big factory. It's a place where the people working, they make very good products. But I think there are many other things that are interesting, about German society today, and they are not so appreciated. So some scholars talk about having warm qualities or cold qualities. Cold qualities, as you can imagine, we are talking about being efficient, being good in business, being very well educated, etc. Warm qualities have more to do with leisure. Are people hedonistic? It's a place where you can have a good time. People are artistic, I mean, so ideally you want to have both things, and that's when you build a really, really strong brand. I would say in the United States, the stronger brand is California, probably in the world. Probably in the world, California has the strongest brand. It's not a country, but you don't need to have a country to have a strong brand. So when people think of California, they think of Silicon Valley, and they think of Los Angeles, Hollywood, and the entertainment industry, and the beaches and a number of things. So that's the way you build a strong brand. That's why, for example, Apple, when you open an Apple product these days, you see that it says design in California.
Yeah, well, that's
But
actually
in California.
what I wanted to interject here. Like in the case of individuals, in the case of businesses, in the case of countries, you also come with the baggage. You know, people ask you, where are you from? Are you from here? Are you from the Western world? Are you from the Eastern world? You know, when you have a president that calls whole countries a-hole countries, um, then you chip away, in my view, some of the branding of America. You know, when you talk about California, but you push all the time only the Silicon Valley, without talking about the fact that you can create wealth only with the work of maquiladoras people in Mexico, or with cheap work from Asian countries, then it's not really real. When you talk about only Los Angeles, but you don't talk about the violence of the police in Los Angeles and the riots, you know, um, it's a different perception. So that's my problem with branding. That sometimes some people come with a ready baggage that is positive. Some people come with already a perception of something negative, and they will have to fight it all their lives as a country. um, you know, I was thinking about Poland, for example, their perception into the view of the rest of the European Union. And I remember about 10 years ago, the Polish were very proud by the fact that in Germany they were showing the image of the muscly, very young Polish plumber that was very sexy, and he was good on the German market. And with that, they were thinking they were promoting Poland, but he was a plumber. So if your positive thing is that you can give a very young man who's a good with his hands, I don't know if that is really creating a good brand for the country or the nation. You know, when I presented myself here in the St. Louis area to my neighbors, when they hear about Romania, they ask me, "Oh, I think I know a lady that we used once to take care of our kids who was from Romania." So, you know, um,
Yeah, but I mean, what you have to admit is that to have a strong national brand makes life easier for the citizens
yeah,
and
that's
for the
true.
company.
That's true.
So there is a sense of not having to demonstrate certain things if your national brands is supporting certain qualities. You are already given the benefit of the doubt. And I'm talking also at the corporate level. So if you see I don't know, a fridge that is made in Turkey is different than if you see a fridge that is made in Germany. You know, maybe the features of the fridge, but you probably can charge more for the fridge if it has the made in Germany than the made in Turkey. Um, and we see that. I think we see that all the time in the supermarket and in other stores. That it's
Right.
easier just to get adding to charge, for example, for premium price if things come from a certain place. I mean, look at IKEA. IKEA from Sweden. Well, there's nothing done remotely in Sweden in IKEA. I mean, however, people like to see the orange and the blue. And it's like you're seeing the Swedish national flag in everything that you buy in IKEA. Even if nothing is done nothing is made in IKEA. It's some design there. I mean, in theory, they show you the names of these Swedish names, that they design your sofa or your table, But really, I mean, nothing is done there.
Right. Right. Like many cars that are, you know, sold in the United States, but they are made in Mexico or other parts of the world. You know, I see many times at showrooms Fords that are very modern, but they are, it says on them, assembled in Mexico. You know, because the company chose to go over there because it was not paying taxes and cheaper labor force.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and look at China. look at China. I mean, China has seen an opportunity during this crisis to, I think, the main deficit of China. I mean, China is a strong power in the size of the economy. It has a good army, you know. It has hard power, what we call hard power, you know. The US owes a lot of money to China, you know. I mean, it's like, but it doesn't have soft power. Yeah? The idea that Chinese culture is attractive, that is fun, you know, that is entertaining, that is light, you know, that is friendly. It looks a little heavy, you know.
Yes.
And I think they have seen this pandemic as an opportunity to project soft power, you know, the being kind of more humanist. For example, sending help to Italy, you know, sending help to Russia, sending help to the United States, you know. I mean, it's like sending masks and that's something that every country needs, you know, especially if you want to to play a role in the global arena, you know. So, and I think that in the U.S., because of the characteristics of how well, I mean, because how many more resources the U.S. as a country has to project its image than most of the world. The U.S. doesn't have, well, it does have, it certainly does have public diplomacy, organized public diplomacy and all this, but there's not a consortium in the U.S. that is in charge of the national U.S. brand. There's nothing like that from the government. However, in most of the European countries, there is that. There is a department that is part of the Minister of Public Affairs or the Foreign Affairs that has to do with country brand, you know. And there is somebody in charge, and there is something like that in UK, there is something like that in France, there is something like that in Spain, you know, and there is a budget for that, to do some kind of organized, centralized government strategy to project the image of the countries, you know. And the US doesn't need that because just with fiction products and the corporate power that the US has, they don't need to do that, you know. But for in most of the world, attention is appreciated, and it's very difficult to gain attention. I mean, can you think of what kind of stories do you read about Romania in the US media? What kind of stories do you see in the PBS or in the CNN? Or, I mean, how difficult is that? You know, how strong the competition it is, you know?
Yeah, that is the issue. Actually, in American news, you almost never hear about the rest of the world until there's something negative.
So only the great opinion leaders in the U.S. they know about as they have a broad knowledge about the rest of the world. You know, most of the people is for a number of reasons that will be long to discuss. It's complicated to have to be able to attract their attention. You know, I mean, it's just very difficult. I've found that probably to have a successful show in Netflix produced in your country is probably one of the best ways to do it. You know, if you produce a good fiction product, you're going to project the image of your country much better than spending money in anything else.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, let's move to the next on the list is John, and John is present, so he can ask his own questions if you want.
Okay, I've just unmuted myself, right? You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I had a series of questions, and basically, I just want to sort of, instead of like reading them word for word, I want to mention that I have studied, I took a class on politics of development as a political science student. And we studied like some of the countries that are, you know, like in Latin America and Africa and so on. But also I've read news stories that say, for example, in Mexico and maybe some Central American countries, that there are like organized drug cartels and very large gangs that have even more influence in some cases over the public than the government does. And that's sort of what inspired one of my questions when I asked, I got to read this off a little bit, but so does this influence public relations practitioners in Latin America? Are they influenced by corruption or maybe the power of organized crime, large organized crime there?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and it depends on the country. I mean, of course, it's not, and I wouldn't say it's 100% generalized, but yeah, one of the things, the first things I do with my students is to show them the map, the world map of the transparency index. And the transparency index basically has like red zones and yellow zones. Yellow zones are the most transparent societies. Red zones are the least transparent societies, or in other words, more corrupted societies. Most of the world is in red, you know. Most of the world is not yellow. Even the US is not perfectly yellow. You know, there are very few places that can be considered only yellow. You know, and Latin America is red. It's very red. You know, how does it affect practitioners? Well, I think in a way, and it's something in that article I wrote comparing Mexico and China, talk about the cultivation of government officials in most of the Latin American countries is important, you know. So your menu of public relations has to do with that, sometimes more than targeting consumers. It's more important to target the right government officials, you know, through personal relationships or not, but but basically spending time explaining who you are, you know, to these government officials, and that's important. Crime, yeah, crime can be important as well, you know, because it affects the freedom of expression of journalists. I mean, in Mexico, they have a problem with it. I would say that not that necessarily they are going to kill you, you know, your information is, is not what they expect to hear, but your life can be difficult, you know, in economic terms too. So the smallest is your media outlets, the smallest and weaker they are, the more difficult it is for you to be independent, you know. I mean, it's the reality. I mean, I see in the US that happening at the local level. I see the local newspaper where I live. It only says good news about local businesses and the university, and everything is good, you know. So imagine that, but at the macro level. Mm? In countries where they have good newspapers in Mexico, but those newspapers are read only by an elite, you know. That's why they are so good, because they are targeting the people, the most educated people in society, you know. But it's not like here, for example, where you have catch it all newspapers in the American society. So I
And
think that
people still read newspapers in Latin America.
well, I mean, online, you know. I mean, I don't know I don't know the level of hard copy sales, but certainly they do on the online newspapers work as here. I mean, there's no difference. Probably more. I would say that more traditional societies probably they read more hard copy newspapers, but if not, the online newspapers are they did a good, nice transition, you know, to it. So. Yeah, I think both factors they do affect how what are the concerns of organizations in terms of relationships. I would say that those are big concerns in Latin America. Government and in some specific countries the crime can be a concern. I wouldn't say crime as much in terms of. I mean, there are cases, but I wouldn't say that that's for in terms of corporate life. I don't think crime would play a role. You know, I would say that maybe bribery would be more important than crime. You know, some kind of something very common there is that you know I asked you if you sorry are a PR practitioner and I'm a journalist with a low salary, I probably have to do 2 or 3 different jobs to get good salary. I have kids. I have one kid that like public relations. I'm gonna ask you probably, sorry, if my daughter can do an internship with you in your PR field. You know, I mean that's probably gonna happen sooner or later. You know,
So it's not all
And
like
those kind of things are.
it's not all like in telenovelas.
No, I haven't seen telenovelas for a while, but well, telenovelas have a lot of conflict, you know, and a lot of cross interest, you know. So in a way, telenovelas don't talk about business much, but in terms of relationships, they are very complicated, you know, very incestuous.
You said that maybe you can increase country's brand if you have a successful Netflix series. And I tried to look at the life of Simon Bolivar. It's on Netflix, but then I saw that series one was 60 episodes, and I said, no, it's impossible.
Oh, you mean? Well, I think Netflix is helping a lot and making foreign products making Americans more comfortable with foreign products. I think there is now a sort of a dubbing industry that it didn't used to exist. Now you can watch dubbed foreign movies or series in Netflix. And I've found more. I mean, I've been living here for 13 years, so I'm noticed that more Americans are exposed to foreign fiction than they used to be, you know, and they see it as more natural. And I think it has a lot to do with Netflix, definitely, you know. And I think that's a great. I think probably the most important mean in terms of representation to project the reputation of a specific place is fiction, you know, by far more than news. I don't think news is as important as fiction. It's hard to say, but it's like that. I think fiction is more important. Yeah.
Okay, John, did you have another question or are you done? Don't forget to unmute yourself. John, can you hear me? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. I'm just taking a lot of notes. So you did answer earlier, much earlier in the meeting, about how Latin Americans, they get the same theory in their education that Americans get, and it's just translated, you know, from American theory. So I will skip that question I had about, you know, how Latin Americans, their education. And then, well, I don't know, you kind of have touched on this about some of the uniquely South or Central American issues that public relations practitioners address in countries there. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, but before I finish, I also just wanted to mention one unique large thing was the Rio de Janeiro Olympics. And if you wanted to also talk about PR there, like, you know, was that anything you wanted to say about that? So that's basically it. I mean, I'm not reading my questions word for word. I'm just saying, what are some uniquely South and Central American PR issues or topics, you know, that practitioners address there? And then also, like, anything you'd like to say about the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, you know, so that was it.
Well, I think Brazil organized in 2 years the two largest sport events in the world. One was the Olympics, and the other one was the World Cup. The World Cup in the rest of the world, I would say, not in the US, but in the rest of the world I would say for many people is more important than the Olympics, you know. And why was that a coincidence? Why Brazil was organizing these two large events in such a short period of time? No, I mean, it's something that is a deliberated strategy, you know. And I mean, and it's a strategic strategy. I mean, it's a strategic strategy. It's a very strategic purpose, because Brazil, the role of Brazil, the role they see themselves playing in the world is to be a regional power. Yeah? They want to be the regional power in Latin America because they have the largest population, 220 million. They have the largest economy. And they were not playing in the world the kind of role that they think it corresponds to them, you know. So organizing two large events is a way to communicate a number of things. You know? In the case of Brazil, I think, as in the case of most of the countries who organize large sport events, is to show good infrastructures, to show a modern face of a country, you know. a country that we know because of most of the people know because it's festive. There is the carnival, there is hedonistic, etc. But they wanted to show a different side. So I think they wanted to show a country that with modern infrastructures that is advanced in alternative energies, and they also wanted to show a country that is multi-ethnic. I think that they put a lot of. You watch at the ceremonies of both events, the World Cup and the Olympics, you see that they do emphasize how many different types of people there are in Brazil. Many more than people tend to think about. There are people that came to Brazil from all parts of the world. They have Japanese populations. They have population from all over Europe. They have population from Africa. They do have population from other Latin American countries, etc. And they also wanted to show that they are working in the protection also of the forest, and they are concerned about the environment. So they wanted to project they have a hard power side, projecting that they have a good that it's much more modern economy that people think, that they have good infrastructures, but they also wanted to project these soft values of taking care of the environment or having a very diverse population. And I think they were partly successful. And they also wanted to. I think sport results sport results were not as good. I think it's important to have sometimes good sport results. Like in the World Cup, the Brazil team didn't do as well because, as I say, sports is a way to project that your society is working. I think it used to be something that the communist regimes used to do very well. They used to, the Eastern European athletes used to do very well in the Olympics and in international competitions. And I think Brazil didn't do as well, maybe in that, especially in the World Cup. They were defeated relatively early. It was a very humiliating defeat against Germany, like 0-6 or something in the quarterfinals. And that for Brazil is a major issue. But I think it was, and I don't know. I think it was partial. They got partially what they wanted. I mean, I'm not sure it was 100% the type of perception that the perception changed completely. But I think it put Brazil more in the world. And I think that it was probably a positive thing. Probably other people can say that maybe the economic cost was too much for what they got. That's probably an okay criticism that can be done.
I remember there was also this controversial discussion about the fact that most of the people who work at those sports facilities are from favelas, and then they are sent home because they cannot be payers for tickets. They cannot have the entertainment, the product of their work. So it is a big issue over there. I understand they are over policing the favelas, and their policemen just kill to the left and to the right without any criminalizing of their acts.
Yeah, because communication cannot hide reality. I mean, you have a reality, and you cannot just through communication avoid. You have to. You can minimize it, but certainly, I mean, we live in a very globalized, in a way, transparent world, and people, all the foreign correspondents, they saw what they saw there, and Brazilians who disagree with the event, they criticize it and they share information that went viral in social media, so everybody had access to it, So I mean, it's very difficult if things are not the way you would like them to be, that people don't know it. I mean, people are gonna know it.
Talking about branding, I saw like a month ago an article about the fact that in certain favelas, the drug dealers were distributing food to the people, not the government.
They were distributing what?
Food, staple food like
Well,
sugar and flour and stuff like that.
yeah, and when I was talking before about the importance of patronage relationships or clientelism in Latin America, I was talking about that. It's like something you see in Narcos too. You see in Narcos, you see an episode where Pablo Escobar is giving money to poor people. You know, it's like in societies where the access to social capital. I'm talking about medicine. I'm talking about good education. I'm talking about certain type of rights. There are shortcomings in that. People are gonna look for ways to look. People are gonna look for shortcuts, you know, and the shortcut is not going to the institutions to get that. The shortcut is to go to somebody else that is not an institution who can give you that, you know. And that's the example you are describing, or the example of Escobar, that for many people was sanctified. You know, I mean, he was considered like a saint. You know, because he got money from the rich to give to the poor. You know, I mean,
Robin Hood.
that was a popular, some popular wisdom. You know, in some neighborhoods of Medellin. Then that's what you get. You know, and that type of patronage relationship mentality, that's much more abundant in Latin America than in the US. There was that in the 19th century, but it's not. I mean, I would say that it's not anymore, you know. But in Latin America, it still has survived, and I would say that in most of the world, it's still there, you know. I mean, in different manifestations. I would say that Latin America and China are like the most well-known manifestations of this patronage relationship culture. And that certainly affects populations, because your opinion leaders are going to be these patrons, you know, that deliver these resources that are difficult for people to access, you know, and that's the mentality. I give you some, you ask me for something, and you have to do something for me in exchange, and that's the mentality that is at all levels. Mm?
Right.
And when we see the guy who, okay, you can skip a penalty for driving too fast, you give me something, you know. Well, if you give me something, then I'm not gonna charge you that penalty, you know. I mean, and that happens also because of the economy. When you have a weak economy and your salary is low, you try to supplement your salary, and so it's a very broad problem, you know. It's not only culture. It's related to politics. It's related to economics.
Right. Right. No, I consider that these discussions are fascinating, especially when you delve into the issues of other countries, how things are being done, how public relations can survive in certain environments, cultural environments especially. But I want to be respectful for everybody's time. It's already 2:28. So I don't want to profit too much from your time. And I thank you again for, you know, agreeing to be present and talk to us. I'm grateful that at least 3 students showed up. But I assure you that even if the video today is made up of 2 pieces, I will post them on Blackboard, and they will watch this and they will react on our Blackboard site. So again, Cesar, thank you so much for your time. Did you have like a final question for all of us, or a recommendation or something?
No, I'm curious about. So this course is part of a master's degree. What's the master's degree about?
Well, the one that I have in my department, Applied Communication Studies, is a master's in public relations. But it's an elective course that can be taken by students who are in corporate organization, organizational communication, interpersonal communication, health communication that we have in my own department, or by students in MBA or integrative studies at the level of a master degree. So it's an
No, mm-hmm. I was interested about the reasons why the students are taking this master. You know,
Okay.
because I mean, sometimes the problem I have with some students is that they are maybe interested about the topic, but they don't think that they're gonna have to that knowing all these things about Latin America or China, they don't necessarily think they're going to be relevant for them, you know, because they just want to organize weddings, you know, or they want to work for a microbrewery or something like that, you know. So they see them a little bit far away, you know, and part of my work is to make them aware that this is that really, I mean, when you talk about public relations, you always are talking about international public relations, you know. It's like a tautology, you know, because really, I mean, it's
But
Mhm.
many times students, you don't know, maybe during their undergraduate years or because of their family ancestry, they learned or they know a foreign language and they might work for a company that is located somewhere else. They might go with an American company somewhere abroad. Especially in integrative studies or in international studies, I had students who have an interest to study abroad in the international studies program, which is just a major, but at the undergraduate level, where I'm the director, we have an obligation for the students to study a foreign language, level 1 and level 2. Otherwise, they cannot graduate, and to study abroad for at least 6 credits. And many of them choose to spend the semester abroad. So I've had people going to Spain, to Australia, to France, to Northern Africa, to Asian countries, and so on and so forth. Or they want to
Mhm.
work for the military, for example, or
Mm.
for
Yeah,
F-
the military. I'm aware that
or
they
for
work hard for this.
for FBI, for they
Mhm.
hope that through the military they could get into, I don't know, CIA. Uh,
Yeah, no, I was interested about the motivations of the three students that were
yes, yes,
attending
yeah.
this.
Any of you, you can unmute yourselves and say why did you take this course?
Well, I wanted to say before I say that, I just happened to notice over the recent year that this class is also one of 6 required classes for the graduate certificate in public relations and marketing. So this, along with public relations visual communication, and I think public relations for social media, and then 3 marketing classes, even though that's not my program. But I'm just taking this because this program that I'm in, interpersonal communication, really doesn't offer many electives in interpersonal communication. So once I got started, though, on public relations, I thought maybe I should take all of my other electives in one area, which is now public relations. That way, I would have like a sub-emphasis.
Hmm. Okay, that makes
Pretty
sense.
similar. My degree track is organizational communication, but I
Hmm.
have quite an interest in crisis communication, which comes into play quite a bit when we talk about public relations. So I have similarly filled my program of study with lots of PR electives.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think with the COVID pandemic, you have plenty. It gives you a lot of food for thought about
Yeah,
crisis management and how different cultures or countries face it. I mean, according to their values, you know. I think
yeah, it's
something we
honestly
have.
been an exciting time for me. I know it's been chaotic, but I like that. So it's been
Hmm.
a good time to learn.
Hmm. Hmm.
For me, I'm in the integrative studies program. It's in organizational communication and management. So it's almost 50-50. There are a couple more communication classes than management. But with the program that I'm in, it's one of the elective classes that we could choose from their list of electives. And I know that that doesn't sound like the greatest, like that's why I'm in here, is because I needed an elective credit, but I have
Hmm.
actually learned a lot and it's been really interesting. I have traveled abroad a couple of times, and then I was overseas for 2 months about 2 years ago. And I really do enjoy being overseas and just like the culture of different countries and everything like that. So I found this class really interesting so far.
That's great.
I
Yeah,
will also add, with the lack of travel that's able to happen right now, I thought it would be quite interesting to get the experience of other people, although we can't be face to face.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, no,
That's
we are all. This is a great equalizer. You know, nobody can travel. We'll have to be home. It's very democratic. You know, this this pandemic in that sense.
Right, and I think I chose this format because there's nothing like a discussion in person with somebody who either is from a different culture and country or has at least worked abroad. You know, because they will tell you these things that they've seen, that they've lived. And that's why I asked Dr. Garcia to join us. And I am inviting people trying to cover different continents. You know, though you are located now in the United States, your expertise, you know, spans into a part of Europe, Asia, Latin America, and so on.
I really enjoyed talking to you. So
yeah, so I'm choosing, you know, chapters from books, but also industry materials, and complementing the understanding of things that is more practical with discussing with people with such experiences.
That's great.
Okay. Well, yes, John.
Oh, Dr. Garcia, I just want to say I think you are a good speaker who was well prepared today. I was impressed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I really thought your questions were very relevant. You know, in different ways. You know, they made me think. They made me think. They made me go to the core issues. You know, but sometimes scholarship can be too analytical. Sometimes, you know, sometimes too detached of what for people really matters. You know, I mean, it's like sometimes it's what is important for a journal is not necessarily what is important sometimes for a professional or for somebody who wants to be a professional or for a student. I mean, and sometimes I find that the journal articles have certain, we spend too long trying to prove kind of scientifically things that are kind of obvious, and we forget about other things that are what people care really about.
By the way, actually, this pandemic is demonstrating to the academics that they were meeting too much for nothing, that they could do these discussions.
Like department meetings and all that?
Exactly, department meetings, the service that is required of us to be with the Senate, with this committee and the other committee, and you know, to travel to the university to meet for 1 hour. When you travel back and forth, for me, it's an hour and a half. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say I miss being on campus. And
yes, in a way. Yes, in a way.
And I do miss the interaction with the students in person.
Oh,
I think that,
definitely.
I will have been even better. We're all together around a round table today talking about this, you know, with a cup of coffee. But I mean, you know, I thought it's a good surrogate.
Yes. It's still strong. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much for your time, and I'll see you next time. Cesar, maybe in the future we'll meet again at the conference.
Absolutely. Yeah, count on me.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.